On Friday, Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports reported that conversations have already started to ramp up and heat up for a new expanded playoff. Joe, we've only been through the playoff in 1 year at 12 teams, but Ross says that not that 14 teams would be the next expansion point, that 16 teams would be the new expansion point. It would be 4 SEC, 4 Big Ten, 2 ACC, 2 Big 12, 1 group of 5, and 3 at-large bids for the top 16 teams in the country to play the playoff. I let you go first here. Your thoughts on the 16-team playoff?
As I said in the open, I think I'm a little bit more optimistic on playoff expansion than you are and then some other college football fans. The first thing I just want to bring up, I feel like a lot of people are asking, why the hell expand it to 16 when we just expanded to 12? Why didn't we jump straight to 16 in the first place? We got to recognize that college football is so slow moving. It is clunky. It is not a linear progression whenever it makes changes. Think about how long it took to go to the BCS, to the 14 playoff, to the 12-team playoff, to where we are now. This is actually pretty fast in the timeline. We have to test things out before we can actually make the jump and the changes that we're eventually planning for. I bet this has been on the table the entire time, and I bet part of the plan was, let's do 12. Let's see if people watch it. Let's see if the games are decent, and then we'll move to 16.
Mm-hmm.
Blake, I think that because the cat is too far out of the bag that we expanded the playoff, that 16 is the best number. I think that 16 was a better number than 12. And I have said this before. I think that with a 16-team field, it allows for more filtering. It allows for the teams that we think are questionably in the field to play other teams that are just on the cusp, and for teams that don't regularly see each other in the regular season, whenever it might be, to prove if they deserve to get to the next round. I think that we forget that the second round of the playoff this year ended up being quite entertaining, especially the Arizona State-Texas game that was not supposed to be a good football game. So my biggest talking point here, and I know you disagree, is, Blake, I think that this expansion is where we should have been originally, because it's going to allow for us creating the most entertaining games. It doesn't matter if all 16 teams can win a national championship. We're too far gone. We need to get what is going to create the best product on the field.
Let's talk about this then. You talk about getting the best product on the field. Okay, that sounds fine and dandy. Well, why do you have to expand games to do it? Stay with me. Joe, you know what the number one thing, and I need you to stay with me on here because I'm going to get to a point. I want nobody in college football to get kicked out for targeting ever again. Let me tell you why. You kick out players every Saturday about them trying, and I know that some are egregious, and if you want to kick out those guys that it's egregious when they're doing it, fine. You're constantly telling me that you're kicking out players and then suspending them for the next half, damn near sometimes in certain situations suspending them for an entire game. Because if you get it in the first half or the start of a second half and you got to miss the first half of next week, you're suspending a kid an entire game for targeting. But now you want to go out there and make more games. Joe, what if you're in the 10 to 16 range? Now when you expand it, you're having to play another game here. Like you're legitimately talking about player safety all the time and you're not taking on player safety? How is that? How is that humanly possible? So listen, if you want to go to it, these players are getting TV revenue money. You don't have to kick them out anymore. Guess what you can do? Have bylaws in your conferences and literally fine them from doing it. But don't talk to me ever again about player safety when you're making more games. That's number one for me. Okay. And I think that everybody should get on board with that. No player should get kicked out of a game for targeting in the playoff when money's on the line, when literally you're adding games to people in kids' schedules. Why would you do that? Everybody's got to be behind that. That was the first thought that I had. Here's the thing for me, though, on the expanded playoff. Why did you do it? Why did you expand the playoff? Let's get down to brass tacks. It's not because that you thought that South Carolina could have won a national title last year?
No.
It's not.
No.
It's not.
No.
It's because you want more money. College football at the FBS level is not like any other sport. The draft in major league sports makes things different because the bottom teams get the top players. These teams are recruiting at the top and will remain there. Now, this is what you're going to have. Some of those conferences will bring in and out some guys from their own conference that can get in the playoff. You will see more G5 teams other than Boise State getting into the playoff. But, Joe, in the last 20 years, outside of Auburn, we have constantly seen the same teams in the national championship games. Ohio State and Notre Dame. Well, Notre Dame's been in the national title before. They've been in the playoff more than anybody when you're talking about it. LSU, Alabama, those teams have constantly won national titles. Michigan was in their third straight playoff when they won a national title. So when I look at this and say that you're expanding, I don't hate more football. Joe, thank you. Guess what, buddy? Congratulations. You and I get to make more money because we do reaction videos to every single game. Congratulations. Me and you make more money. That is great. Why would I want to come in here and think and say that I don't think it's a good thing for the sport if it makes me more money? How stupid would I be? So when I look at this, though, there are a couple of things that I hate. Why are we doing auto bids? And before you say that there's no auto bids, Joe, 44221, 44221. I could make the justification and would hear the justification for the SEC and the Big Ten. Joe, there was not two Big 12 teams that deserve to be in the playoff, even in a 16-team field. So as much as you expand this, think about this. Joe, Iowa State would have been in the playoff over Illinois. Joe, they would have been in the playoff over South Carolina. And now I'm having, even with the three at-large bids, because you would have had to put another team into the playoff, which takes somebody out. So that Ole Miss, Alabama would have gotten in. South Carolina and Illinois would have been out. They would have been on the outside looking in. Okay. What are we doing here?
I don't want to jump right to the auto bid stuff just yet because you just laid out a bunch. Laid out a bunch of points. We'll get back
to that. But the auto bid thing, I hate more than any of this.
I definitely want to address that, and I definitely want to talk about that. But you talked about the first thing, finances, money being a driving force for the expansion. I think that now more than ever, we need to be aware that funneling more money into the system has to happen. And it has to happen because revenue sharing is now a reality. It is going to be a reality once the House case comes through. Teams are going to be hurting to pay their players. Not the Blue Bloods. They're going to be fine. But conferences need more money. Athletic departments need more money. Putting more games on TV that are going to generate big audiences that aren't just your typical run-of-the-mill dipshit bowl game. Those are sources of revenue that these teams now need. The second part with this, I am and you kind of talked about like the competitive side of the typical teams that are in the mix. I don't look at college expansion, and I think that it's frankly naive for many people to try and make the argument of it creates the chance for a team like South Carolina last year to win a national title. I don't think that is not my take. I do not believe in that. What I am advocating for is when we got to watch Illinois versus South Carolina in their bowl game this year. It was a meaningless bowl game, but it was one of the most entertaining postseason games that we got in 2024.
I mean, Shane Beamer and your best friend almost fought. Like they were pissed.
It was one of the most, but my whole point here is that if we create more matchups like this, and before you jump in with responding about the auto bid stuff, just pretend that was a game.
Okay.
More matchups like that are what I want in the college football playoff field. I want more of the bowl games to matter. Again, the cat is out of the bag. We can't wrangle the damn cat. The cat is running amok and knocking shit over. the least we can do is get the cat to calm down. We need to do whatever is going to create more entertainment and is going to create a better outcome on the field. So I would like to see Illinois play South Carolina and then learn who the better team of those two were after we spent the whole lead up to the final playoff ranking debating who was actually the better team. So I'm saying this to say that, like, we get chances to prove who are the most competitive teams. Those teams aren't going to win national titles, but those first round games will be actually entertaining and good to watch. That is my focus with this.
I think it dilutes the product, though. Every time that you put it dilutes the regular season. Because, Joe, going 9-3, and you could say, well, it makes it more competitive for you because then you'll be in a playoff and you could go 9-3 and make a playoff. Okay. No, but what makes college football more different than every other sport, every one of them, is due to the fact the ramifications of losing on a Saturday night are deafening. If you lose on a Sunday night in the NFL, okay, you don't like it, but okay, all right. Just got to respond. Got to be better. You lost the game in the NFL. Okay. What makes college football the best? It makes it the best because, Joe, when Texas goes into Alabama and wins, when Michigan at the end of the season goes in and wins. Now, I know that against Ohio State and wins. Now, I know Ohio State's your national champion. Boy, how deafening it would have been for Ryan Day if you don't have an expanded playoff. Boy, how bad would it have been?
The problem is, though, and I agree with that, that is what made the sport unique for decades, especially before we even had a national championship game. For a century, it was what made it entertaining, was that if you lost a game, it completely complicated. You had to pray that things went your way. I would argue, though, in a world where we can't create equity amongst schedules, where we spent the whole last month arguing over who had the harder schedule. We can't, like,
we know who had the harder schedule.
Okay, I forget that for a second. I'm just saying that to say is that the often argument from SEC supporters, I'm not saying that's you, is that a 9-3 season is a better record than a 10-2 Big Ten season. And some might argue that a 10-2 SEC season is better than an 11-1 Big Ten season.
Well, let me stop you right there for just an example, or for just a second. Let's concede for me the fact of an example that the Big Ten, that let's just say the 10-2 Big Ten team gets in. I'm not going to mention them. You can't convince me that a 9-3 Iowa State deserves to be in over any one of those teams. Illinois, South Carolina, you still can't do it.
But the opening round allows us to prove if those teams were legit or not. We thought that Arizona State,
like SMU, Boise State, and Arizona State, who all lost.
But okay. SMU and Boise State was an exception to the conversation that we're having. That was a shit show in the first year. I think everyone agrees that was a mistake, them getting the bye that they did. SMU having to play Penn State in the first round is an example of what I'm talking about. SMU would have to play, I don't know, I'm just throwing out like a Miami or something like that, where we would get to weed out the fake good team and send them home, and the team that was competitive enough would get to move on. But my whole point is that we thought that Arizona State was going to get their asses kicked, and they fought, and it gave us one of the best games of the season. One of the best games we saw all year.
The problem with taking the one game against Arizona State and Texas is very prisoner prone. The reason it's very prisoner prone is because a lot of these teams have gone in situations like that. Joe, they almost got beat by Arizona State, and then the next week almost knocked off the champion. They play to the level of their opponent every week, whether people want to agree that or not. But when you go and look at every other time that a team like that, Hawaii, back in the late 2000s or the 2010s, came in there and got their just absolute blocks knocked off. When Utah would go to the Pac-12 and play Arizona. What?
I'm playing Hawaii. I have the Hawaii Sugar Bowl hat. That's why I'm pointing.
Okay, well, I didn't even notice that. Okay, you go into a situation where Ohio State goes into the Rose Bowl and in the Pac-12 obliterates Utah. Obliterates them. We used to have those conversations about the Pac-12. So, like, Joe, we've always talked about those teams getting blown out. Always getting blown out. And now we want to make it okay. It's not okay. So we're kind of tiptoeing around the auto bid thing here, you and I.
Okay.
But I mean, because that's basically what we're doing, right? Like, we're basically tiptoeing about auto bids. And Joe, that is a joke. Now, it's a joke for me in the sense of that you got to be kidding me that you're expanding after what you watched last year. You got to be kidding me. I know Ohio State went 10-2. It's not the same thing. Joe, I can make the argument, you brought up Miami. I can make the argument they don't deserve to be in either. They didn't. They lost to two bad teams. When I'm sitting there looking at whoever it is, Illinois, South Carolina, Bama, we didn't go against the same thing. Now, that's why they're doing it. It's exactly why they're doing it. The reason they're doing that is so that if in a down year, neither the Big Ten or the SEC doesn't get at least 4 teams in. They've come to an agreement. Sankey and Petiti came to an agreement. Listen, we both know that we're going to have down years in our conference regardless. We make this petty argument about SEC and Big Ten. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that we both get 4 teams in here, and they ruled that. But the justification, what they've done in doing that has prompted for other conferences to think that they had the same seat at the table. And I don't want to get in that argument with you, but there's no way in God's hell that you can sit here and look at me in the face and tell me that Iowa State belongs in the playoff before any of those teams that were 12 through 16. Because Bama still ended at 12. 12 to 16 has got to be out because of Iowa State? Like, what?
The problem I have with I understand that you're saying that, like, last year, Iowa State specifically being in would have been problematic because they weren't a good team. They got their asses kicked by Arizona State in the Big 12 championship game. They would not have shown up suddenly and played. I mean, maybe they could have. Maybe they get I don't know. Maybe they're just spitballing here. Maybe they play the G5 team or something. Whatever. I reject the premise that you bring up by saying that they think that they have the same seat at the table as the SEC and the Big Ten. But they literally, no, you're right. They literally don't. They have 2 compared to 4. They have 2 seats. They have less opportunities. Not to mention the fact that the at-large will likely lead to 2 more SEC teams or 2 more Big Ten teams getting in. Most likely 2 more SEC teams.
Well, that's fine. But they're doing it at large. So they're not getting any guarantee. Joe, the best teams should be in the playoff.
Okay.
That's the bottom line.
The problem is the margins are so thin between a lot of these teams that are ranked in the top 18, which was where Iowa State got cut off. They're very thin. Iowa State was not a good team last year, but the margins relatively are very thin from Ole Miss to South Carolina to Miami. Actually, BYU, by the way, would have been the second Big 12 team in. But I digress.
They weren't in the Big 12 title game, were they?
It's just the second highest ranked Big 12 team.
Okay, got you. All right, fine.
I digress.
BYU doesn't make your argument any better.
I know it doesn't. I just caught that note. I digress. My point with this is that the margins are so thin that there is naturally going to be bias that leads, if it was just the 16 best teams, the bias of the committee members it's always going to lead into the decision making. So there needs to be protections put into place so that we don't end up with an 8 versus 8 Big 10 versus SEC playoff, or like a 7 versus 8 with one ACC team. And I know that we're talking about the Big 12 here. The ACC was in a down year. Florida State historically has been a great football program, was awful last year. In the next 5 years, they're going to get back to the normal level of competitiveness. Miami is ascending and is going to be in the conversation every single year. We are going to have Clemson in the conversation every single year. The ACC is going to have 3 to 4 really good teams that are worthy of the discussion. The Big 12 is the only one that I will concede, but I will counter by saying that I feel like the Big 12 is improving its quality of play with some of these teams in this conference, especially a team like Texas Tech that is dominating in the transfer portal.
We're arguing about teams that can't win it.
I'm fine with that. We can't. The cat's out of the bag, Blake. Like we can't.
You talked about revenue. You talked about revenue. Let me throw this your way. You talked about revenue because ADs around the country need it, right?
Yes.
How damaging is it that you were going to bring in an Iowa State or BYU over one of these Big Ten or SEC schools who need it just as much as you do?
Wait, what do you mean?
What I mean is just because a lower tier school needs it doesn't mean that the big dudes up top don't need it too. You can't convince me that South Carolina, you can't convince me that Illinois or Ole Miss. You mean to tell me Illinois does not mean more money for their football program? Illinois, they're in the Big Ten, but they're not a massive institution. They're not. So, I mean, like, miss me on that. Well, they need more money. They need money more than you do. So we're going to let them have a seat at the table. I think that's a dumb argument because I need the money too. And I went through a tougher path to get there. So when it comes to they need the money more than I do argument from everybody, well, they need the money to help. So do I. I had to hold more scholarships in the SEC than you do. I have to hold more because of Title IX. I have to hold more than you do in some situations.
Wait, I'm not talking like conference specific when I bring that up. It's just saying in general, we need more of these games because we need more money in the sport because now there is money being shared with the players.
Fine, but the players get a percentage, not an outright.
Yes.
The money doesn't. Well, it will go up based off of revenue, whatever. Joe, I look. We're crippling the sport every time we expand. I really do feel that because again, you're making the product and you're taking the product that no one asked you to take. No one asked you to take out more of 8 teams. No one was telling you to take the product that was the most unique of the sports and change it. Every time that we expand, we're slapping the fan in the face. We are. And you could say, well, we'll see better games. Cool. Great. I love more football too. But what made it different from everything else was the way that it was structured. And I understand that it's a changing time and we got to get over it. No one's making you go to 16 teams. No one. And Joe, here's my fear. My fear is that we got to go to 32. Like those start becoming my fears because, Joe, They keep saying that name something that these conference commissioners have said like, no, man, we're not really looking to do X, Y, or Z. Greg Sankey last year at SEC Media Days literally stated, we're not looking to expand past a 12-team playoff. He flat out lied. If it's going to make his bottom dollar go up, they will make that move. You know it, and I know it.
I think that, like, I brought this up at the beginning. I kind of reject, not completely, but I kind of reject the premise that it completely ruins the product of in the season. I know.
Okay,
but just generally that like this is kind of doom or gloom. That this is only bad. I think that there is a lot of good that comes from it. Just because the sport was done a certain way doesn't mean that we can't try to change it to make it look better. But the thing I agree with you, the biggest thing I agree with you on is that expanding past 16 is the limit. I said it at the beginning of the show. I can't, if we move past 16, then we're entering into a nonsense territory. Like then I have nothing to defend because there are not 24 teams. 32 would be verbose, especially for the fact that not even the FCS does 32 teams. 2014 playoff for the FCS is a little diluted because for the most part, the teams that end up making the Final Four are the top 8 teams every single year.
Go fucking figure.
I'm saying this to say that 16 is the most that I can stomach. I'm a little bit more optimistic about 16 than many people. I was very optimistic about the 12-team expansion when you and I first started talking about it, when we first started doing the show. But the one thing I will 1000% stand on is anything. I'm not just a total blind expansionist. Like we need to put a freaking cap on this thing. Can't go further than 16.
You know, I was wrong about something on the show. And I've told you before, I will admit where I'm wrong. You know, in the beginning when we had these conversations last year and I said I thought it should go to 8 and I would never fight for a team that didn't get in the top 8, last year proved me I was wrong. It proved me I was wrong because I get what fine. Even if we get more games and everybody loves it more and I'm on the hill just sitting there and saying, okay, whatever. I also get to a place, Joe, where I'm like, man, what? Again, you've changed the sport because of it. You've changed the sport. You're changing the culture around college campuses on a general Saturday every single week. Joe, why would I give a flying shit if I lose any more games outside of 3? Why would I? If I'm an SEC team, why would the goal is 9 wins? So
why is that a bad thing?
Because you would have situations where teams would be out of the playoff. You already had your mini playoff. You literally. It's called the regular season.
The regular season, I don't totally agree with where you're coming with this. Like, I understand what you're saying that like historically an 11-1 season was something that was very hard to maintain. And we didn't even see very many this year. We didn't see the very many.
No, we saw one.
And ironically, the 10-2, 11-1 team, or sorry, not 10-2, the 12-0, 11-1 teams that we had this year didn't make the national championship. The expansion created the opportunity for other teams that had better rosters to win a national title. So I would then respond to what you're saying by saying that we now get to actually have the real proven national champion. Ohio State had the best roster. They were able to bounce back and recover.
So you just confirmed my point. So losing to Michigan meant absolutely nothing.
It means less than what it used to.
Right.
It not only means
that
nothing.
That rivalry game in the past with Michigan beating them takes a national title away from them. So when you go into a house for recruiting purposes and you say, we were the dudes, we're building something special. We kept Ohio State out of the playoff. Joe, that was all a part of college football. You're making my point for me. Thank you for making my point.
I don't think I'm necessarily making your point. I understand that it funnels into your argument that game becomes less meaningful. But
it does become less meaningful. Why would I give a shit?
It's just as meaningful. Ask Ohio State. I mean, I think Ohio State fans and Michigan fans would agree that game was still pretty meaningful.
But here's the truth. Long in 10 years, yes, you're going to want to beat your rival. More than anything, they hate each other. I get it. But Joe, realistically, you know what every person that's going to pick up that phone Monday morning and call into their local radio show is going to say? It sucks that we keep losing to Michigan, but we get to turn right around and correct our wrongs in a playoff. It will become less meaningless because even though you lost, fine, we lost. Their goal is to get to a national title. They can say whatever they want about the hatred with Michigan and all that shit. They can say whatever they want. Their number one goal, it's more than the Big 12. Big 10, excuse me. It's more than winning the Big 10. Sure, they would like to grab that along the way. What is the truth? Everybody wants one thing. Schools like that, what's Notre Dame been searching for since 88? And I'm not taking a shot at you. They're not shooting for a conference championship. They're not shooting for a bowl bid. They're shooting for the one thing that they want the most. So, yes, I mean, like, it was unique and great in its own way. Joe, what national champion before a 14 playoff would you not have awarded? Please tell me. I mean, that Ohio State team going to go in there and beat Georgia in 2022? No, they're not. Sorry. They're a they're a really good roster, but they're not. They got offensive line issues, and you're talking about the best defense that arguably we've seen in the last 2 decades. Get the fuck out of my face with that. They lost 2 games. You can't convince me that Georgia don't walk. By the way, Ohio State.
You're using. Hold on. You're using a very specific instance of a very specific year. Like
Ohio State went against them that same year with the NFL rookie at quarterback that won the Rookie of the Year in C.J. Stroud.
But if we didn't expand the playoff, we wouldn't have been given that matchup. if the playoff wasn't expanded from just a head-to-head national champion to 4 teams,
Ohio State's
that
still
match.
in.
No, but that matchup wouldn't have existed if we didn't expand in the first place. We're creating those opportunities in those matchups. We created those opportunities as matchups this year with the expand. The real stopping point should have been 8. The real stopping point should have been 8 because the top 8 teams were the best teams that were in the playoff this year. And they gave us the best games, and they were the ones that were good enough to win a national title.
And guess what? If you would have kept auto bids too, so you can say whatever you want about my point, but you keep auto bids, Ohio State wouldn't have been in. They wouldn't have been in.
Auto bids?
Yeah, because if you think about it, if you kept auto bids and they're the number 8 team, were they not?
Yeah, but they would have been.
There wouldn't be an.
There would.
You have your top 5, right? You have your top 5.
Top 4 conference champions and
then the
G5 team,
so
and then they would have 3. They would have 3 at large. It would be 3 at large teams. Ohio State would have gotten in.
No, who would have been the other 3? SMU.
No, SMU would not have gotten in.
SMU was what? What was the number?
No one. I don't know what seed they were, but nobody. No, they were pretty low, anyways.
Penn State would have gotten in.
But Penn State and Ohio State would have both gotten in, and we would have been sitting and arguing what other SEC team should have gotten in. It would, if we lived in an 8-team playoff.
It would have been Tennessee.
It probably would have been Tennessee or Georgia. No, it would have been Georgia because Georgia beat Tennessee.
It would have been Texas.
Oh yeah, right.
It would have been Texas.
It would have been Georgia and Texas that went, and I don't know. We're this is
spending way too much time.
Exercise.